Welcome to the Oshow. I'm Laura Babcock, and honestly, I have to ask, what the hell is going on in Hamilton? And I think in Ontario, if you extrapolate some of the things we're dealing with here in our city. First, we've got a baby born in an encampment. This dispels any myth that we are not in a full-on homelessness crisis in this province when we're actually having children born in tents. I want that to sit with all of us for a moment. And the very same councillor who went to the media with that this week is also part of a push to prevent some surface parking lots that don't seem to be in very high use from becoming affordable housing, especially when they're perfectly located towards amenities. I mean, how can you have it both ways? I don't think you can. And we have some video we're going to look at to see what on earth Councillor Matt Francis is talking about. But also it goes beyond that. We have students at McMaster University who can't get clean drinking water because of some sort of private development within the institution. Does that even make any sense? There was a press conference about that just yesterday. And also there is, of course, the issue of policing. We have a huge municipal budget coming up, as most municipalities have. And part of that, one of the largest expenses, is policing. Well, in Hamilton, the police came forward with an ask for over 20 million, but not for, more cops on the street. 20 million as a maintenance budget. That's the number of the increase. And when our guest on today's program, a member of the Police Services Board and a member of Hamilton Council, tried to just get questions asked, not only was he shut down by Mayor Andrea Horvath in the meeting, but this week, the Police Service Board chair decided to go on the record during her chair remarks and say enough about this councillor, Cameron Kroetsch, that one of the other board members likened it to slander.
Is it just that the chair can voice their own individual personal opinions and quite frankly, slander certain board members in this particular part of the meeting?
We have that exchange as well. I mean, if we can't even question ask for $20 million just to maintain current service levels, what's the point of having a police services board? We got problems, Ontario. We need to fix them, but we're not going to fix them by ignoring them and not discussing them and closing our eyes to them. We have to have the conversation. So welcome back to the Oshow, Councillor Cameron Kroetsch. Cameron, it's good to have you back.
Thanks, Laura. Great to be here.
Now, last time we talked, you brought up the whole crisis at McMaster with the water, and I want to get to that because I know there's just a presser yesterday. And you talked about trying to get the HATS Tiny Shelters program built, and you got bullied by the community. You got death threats. The project didn't happen. Every time I see people in homelessness in this community lining up downtown at Gore Park, I think, wow, wouldn't it have been wonderful if even some of them were accessing those shelters that never got done. So, I mean, you have been kind of at the foreground of a number of these issues. So I want to start with you on the one around the baby born in the encampment and the fact that there has been a push to get the armories open or to get City Centre open or Sir John A. Macdonald. What did you do with City Centre? Where does that stand? Is there any hope for the armories? I mean, right off the top, Councillor, is there any hope for the people in this city who are still looking at months more of Canadian cold?
Yeah, those are great questions. And it's kind of questions I get asked a lot by residents, emails, phone calls. I run into people on the street. People are feeling desperate and they're wondering what's happening. And yeah, you're right. When we see babies being born in encampments, that can really trigger things for people. But I'll be honest with you and say that that's not new. Babies have been born in encampments. Babies have been born in situations where folks have been deprived of housing for a very long time. Our visibility of that has changed. So now we're seeing it more, and that's making people more concerned and wanting to help and offer solutions. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here. I recognize that it's not going to be easy, and a lot of the solutions that are out there are complicated or can't happen in the timeline we want them to happen, or there's not the funding to make them happen in the way they should. The armories is a great example of something I think that is a good solution in terms of the fact that it's not being, I think, overly utilized right now. Again, I'm not a military expert and don't know what the federal government's frankly doing over there on a daily basis, but the potential for that huge amount of space to be used is there. Same thing with the city center. I mean, a lot of it's been demolished and there's parts that aren't really very useful. But there are some spaces there, especially in the former spaces where the city staff from City Hall were, that are larger, that are more open, that have washrooms. Unfortunately, I just learned this. All of the electrical and all the plumbing has been destroyed. A lot of it's gone to salvage, and frankly, pouring that equipment, those resources, the wiring, the plumbing back into that building to keep it going for maybe another year before it's demolished probably isn't going to be feasible. And I'll post about that later, which is disappointing, but I'm trying. And I'm trying to find solutions. And I think it's important for us to try. These are unconventional times. We need to be doing unconventional things to get there. In terms of some of the other things you asked about, honestly, it's not my job to do government relations with the province and the federal government. We have a team at the city, including the mayor, Councilor Huang, Councilor Nernan, because they sit on some of those bodies, and our government relations folks. I know they're trying to do this, but we got a provincial government here who's just not very interested in doing what people are asking them to do, and not necessarily doing the things that are right either. Every week we see scandal after scandal coming forward of another round of emails demonstrating that people knew things they said they didn't know. We got a government who's continuing to frankly put private interests ahead of public interests. So until we move away from that and get a government in place who's going to protect the public's interest, we're going to continue to have these problems. Cities, and there's 444 of us, are putting pressure on them, and they're kind of saying, thanks, but no thanks. Though there's some bright spots, like 200 cities signed on to legislation to stop councillors from harassing members of city staff and to be held to the same, frankly, the same legislation that city staff themselves are held to. And with the 200 municipalities signing on together, that's actually getting some traction and moving forward now. So I think that's what we have to really see is province-wide, countrywide, cities just saying, look, and unfortunately right now it's coming from grassroots activists and not from inside City Hall.
Well, I mean, that's how we got the Greenbelt reversed, right? The mayor only got, and everyone went to a rally, only got on board when we already won the fight as activists on that file. And it's the only thing that works with the Ford government is relentless public pressure. They cave to pressure. And we're actually seeing today, there's a new poll that came out that said that there is now a chunk of independent, undecided voters in Ontario who were formerly PC voters. So if another leader comes up and shows a viable alternative to Ford, they're in deep, deep trouble. And so to your point about the Ford government is incalcitrant and doesn't want to do these things for people. They want to fund private interests, as we've seen with the hospital, the enfeebling of our healthcare system and the enriching of the private nursing agencies paying 3 times, we're paying 3 times as much as taxpayers for the same services. It's absolutely unsustainable and crazy unless you're trying to get rid of public systems and structures and move it to a private model. So if we have a premier, Ford, who is looking to move public stuff to private models, it makes it really tough for municipalities to get stuff done for their citizens, their residents. So I completely take your point. But Ottawa worked with the Trudeau government to open up a building as an emergency shelter, right? It just happened. We're seeing other communities across the country getting their tiny cabins programs done in an expedited manner. So before I let you off the hook with the whole, Ford is not a guy who wants to work with municipalities very well on some of these critical issues, what more can our city do? Because honestly, the Hats thing was disgusting. For 2 years, the community, the citizens from Hats got challenged by council over and over. It felt like it was like theater. It was kind of sick. And then finally, when a site is selected, you go down there to tell people it's going to be a pilot, and there's community meetings and death threats and bullies. And now there are people who could have, however many families, I don't care if it was 20 families that could have been sheltered this winter. They lost the opportunity to be treated humanely because of the cowardice of council. So I know you were not part of the problem on this, Cam, but doesn't the city council own some responsibility? They talk a big game about affordable housing being the priority and homelessness being a crisis. But in my mind, every time there's an opportunity for Mayor Horvath to do the right thing or for council to speak up with some kind of sign of character and solidarity on these priorities, they don't.
On this one, I think it's tough. I mean, everyone on council actually voted in favor of that site. So we didn't actually have a division on council about that. People didn't speak out about it. No one uttered a word actually during that debate. And it was, okay, we're going to support this. The council is going to support it. And the mayor was one of those people that supported it. The problem, I think, where it fell apart is some of the things you talked about, certainly, right? So there was a lot of pushback, but also the other issues, I think, which are important to mention are that, and this isn't really talked about, but I think it's essential to understanding, is part of the recommendation wasn't just, here's a site, go ahead. It was, okay, we need an operating agreement with you. Like, how are you going to do it? The city works with partners all the time, right? Where we say, we want to give you funding to deliver a winter response strategy or shelter services. Do you have a place? Yes. Do you have the staff? Yes. We'll provide you the funding. You have the expertise. Similar model here. And Hat said at the end of it, look, we're walking away from this for a bunch of reasons. Some definitely about community pushback, others about technical stuff, others about funding, right? So I think they now have an opportunity, and they're actually coming forward this quarter with another proposal of somewhere else to go. They're now meeting with councillors. I think I'm meeting with them next week or this week, and a bunch of us are to talk about what their proposal is. Don't have any details yet, but they're coming forward again with another proposal. And so we'll see what the proposal is and evaluate it then. But there is a partnership here, right?
On that
And we
note,
have to say that if we both have to be willing to move forward on projects for them to actually happen.
okay, but we are in unconventional times. We are in an emergency, an actual crisis. The line at Gore used to be 200 people in the spring. Now it's up to 800 to 1,000. This is not as it's always been. And this requires that councils and mayors who say that it's a crisis and emergency actually act like it. The mayor of Halifax canceled his New Year's party to put the money into, with council's permission, into the homeless crisis. Our mayor threw 3 parties. It makes no sense. You cannot say to me that council is actually behind this issue when, yeah, sure, they all voted for the Hats location, but the second there was public pushback from some prominent members of the community, they were all crickets. So that's not being behind something. That's being cowards, right? They left you and Andrea out to dry on that. And frankly, you did most of the comms, no shock, on the fact that council couldn't go with the Hats program. But I cannot accept that council works in partnerships with people, but oh no, technicalities, problems with the partnership, they're taking it back to the drawing board. Where's the leadership, Cam, that says we need this to happen? We are going to move mountains to make it happen. If that wasn't the partner, where's another partner? Is there a collaboration of partners? I'm just looking at week after week after week, cities are sending me, people are sending me articles in the paper, updates on their tiny shelter program, updates on their homeless problem. Like, everybody's doing stuff, and Hamilton keeps finding these technical excuses.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is vocal representation, right? And so people speaking up and demonstrating leadership in public by speaking to these issues. And I'll be honest, I'm somebody who, even if the issue perhaps is a difficult one, I am the kind of person that will speak in public about what I know and will talk about these kinds of things. And I know that's not everybody's style, their approach, their way of doing things. But I will say, Councillor Maureen Wilson, Councillor Huang, Councillor McMeekin, Councillor Nan, and others showed up at some of these Hats meetings and also were quite vocal about some of these things as well. But you're right, it wasn't the majority on council being vocal about this, coming out and saying, look, we've got to make this solution work. If not here, where next, and when, and how can we do it in time for the winter? And so you're right, we didn't have people vocally standing up for those kinds of things. I think this has been, frankly, entangled with the encampment protocol and affordable housing, and has fallen into, as you say, like a pit of technicalities. We have to get it out of there. We have to do everything we can. Last year, we did invest a lot in housing, but we have to do, I think what you're suggesting, I don't disagree with you, is that we have to take more of a formal and vocal public leadership role in defining these issues in our city. And I mean, I'll do what I can, I'll continue to do what I can do to do that. But you're right, it would be important for everyone to do as much of that as they can. You know, I get it. It's not great.
Well, no, it's not. And I noticed she didn't mention the mayor in that list of people who have spoken up, because she doesn't, right? Like, it's beyond, all she does is photo ops and boosterism. And I'm so sick of it. I'm not even waiting anymore for her to step up. This is why I'm pushing for, you know, is council going to start to fight for the things they say that they believe in? Or are they going to use death by delay? Or are they going to use vetocracy to veto everything down because it doesn't meet this perfect purity test for the technical, whatever the, like, it's bullshit to anyone watching it who is meeting people who are starving on the streets and having babies in tents, okay? So I think sometimes we just need to cut through the crap and realize, and that's why I'm having this conversation with you, Councillor, because I know that you're out there vocally fighting for these things. We got McMaster students, right, who can't get clean drinking water. Because, I mean, tell us briefly about that, because that's madness. And you were at the press conference yesterday. Was the mayor there?
I think I was the only member of council who was there, but I get it. Not everybody can make it to everything, but this situation is pretty incredible. I mean, we have a situation where people have been allowed to move into a building that still doesn't have a ramp for folks with disabilities. It still doesn't have what the city considers to be clean drinking water. Now, whether this emerged after inspections were done or before, I have no idea. And I haven't been focused on sort of what's going on in the building side of things. I've been focused on the public health part of things and frankly respond to what residents want. So I'm meeting with actually a group from the building again this week to talk about moving it forward. And I've had conversations with folks at McMaster about this building when I was first elected and asked them, if they were okay with the sort of the footprint here. We're talking about, as one of the people said there, we got Peloton bikes in the basement, or we got Peloton bikes in this building, but we don't even have clean drinking water. Why is this being kind of pitched as a luxury housing development in a way for graduate students? Shouldn't this have been built to actually for the audience of folks who are living there and in an affordable way with larger units? Some people have their families there and larger units. Like, it's not done, it's not completed, it's not finished, but they're moving people in. So that tells me that's about profits. That's about trying to get as many dollars behind this thing as possible. And honestly, I don't know what the future use of this is going to be. Will it always remain a graduate residence? I'm not sure. It does stand out as a bit strange, and students all said that yesterday. The biggest thing I took away from that was that they just feel worried all the time. These are frontline educators in our university system doing the work that we used to have tenure professors doing, and now we've gotten kind of as this part-time parceled out work, and they're doing it front lines. They're marking papers. They're talking in front of students. They're doing that work, and they're living in conditions like this. So we need to support those education workers. We need to make sure that they're treated respectfully and fairly, and people deserve to have a safe, healthy home. We often look at this issue, like I said to CHCH, we often look at this issue as if it's a student housing issue. And it's a housing issue. This is people's homes. This is where they live, and they have a right to live in safety and a right to live in a place that's healthy. And if you can't open the doors on day one and guarantee that, don't open the doors.
Good. Well, I'm glad you were there, and I'm glad that you're keeping us on it. And you're right. It's not just about students versus so-and-so versus so-and-so. And so a last thing on affordable housing here before we get to the fight you had with the Police Services Board on this $20 million police budget that's coming up. And there's some pretty saucy video there that we're going to show our audience in a minute. But this same counselor, Matt Francis, who came out and alerted us to the baby born in, and to your point, once you hear these things, you can't unhear them. I didn't know babies were being born in tents in this city until this Matt Francis came out and said, hey, baby born in a tent. Now it's on the public record, right? So now what the hell are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to build affordable housing. The only solution to ending our tenting crisis is to move people, transition them out of homelessness into deeply affordable housing. I mean, we all know the way out. It's housing first. So then the city is tasked with coming up with some possible parking lots, city-owned municipal lots that are near transit, near, food stores. There's not a lot of use of them, maybe. They're not like highly densified, so we can just put some housing there. Perfect. Wouldn't that make total sense? Yes. Except when this counselor, the lots came up in his ward, now there's a petition out there, and I got sent the petition and I read the petition, and I decided to take my car and my videographer from the Oshow down there so that I could see why is this place not able to have affordable housing? Well, the first thing is there's this veterans lane that they don't want to have in any way moved or changed or desecrated. I get that. We should support our veterans. I couldn't even find the veterans lane because it's basically just an entrance to a municipal parking lot alley behind the Legion and a restaurant. So let's take a look at this 10-second video of us discovering this veterans lane controversy.
So this is the veterans lane that everyone is talking about wanting to protect. It's literally an entrance to a municipal parking lot. A parking lot which, during business hours right now, is pretty empty.
So that's Veterans Lane, and I think that sign and Veterans Lane can be moved to even a street that is much more visible, that's not a parking lot street, and should get even more opportunity to celebrate our veterans. My family were veterans for this country. I'd love to see that. So I think that sign can be moved and we can do more for our veterans if recognition is the only issue here. But then I'm like, okay, there's two sites. The one giant parking lot behind Veterans Lane looks pretty empty. It was a Sunday afternoon, but businesses were open. The Legion was open. It was still pretty empty. So then I went looking for the other piece of property, which apparently can't be affordable housing. Let's have a look at this.
I think we found the other lot. It's where Chad Collins' office is and a physiotherapy studio, potentially. If this is the area where the other lot is.
So Cameron, when you see those two locations, I'm not sure if you've seen them yourself in person or not, but I had to see, to try to understand what would be so terrible about affordable housing on those lots. And I came away thinking there's no reason not to have them unless the neighborhood just doesn't want, you know, different kinds of people living in their neighborhood. And I really hope it doesn't come to that. Their statement says we support affordable housing, but blah, blah, blah. Well, it kind of feels to me like there's not a leg to stand on when it comes to the argument against this.
Yeah, this is a really weird situation in a way because we were talking about protecting surface level parking lots, but we just spent the last, I think, almost a decade really at council debating that issue and putting it to rest and saying, we get it. Parking is important. People need to park somewhere. However, our priorities must be that we're seeing more density throughout the urban boundary, not just downtown, everywhere in our urban boundary. And that includes Ward 5. And we're going to densify, and it's going to be difficult. And these are going to create some challenges for people. But we have to meet not only our obligations for housing, but obligations for affordable housing, because we are decades behind. So we can't simply say, well, this is a parking lot people would like to have. Nope. Council made a priority. The city made a priority to make sure affordable housing was built and more housing was built. And that's got to be where we head with this. You know, when I look at the parcels of land here, and I've looked at the city's online map that shows them kind of which different parcels, most of the part of Veterans Lane isn't going to be impacted at all because the main access to the Legion will still remain there, I think, when this is done. I think the whole thing will probably be actually remaining intact. But if we're protecting what, a driveway? Or protecting a laneway. Again, if people want to do something to support veterans, no problem at all. And I understand it was probably named Veterans Lane because of its association with the Battlefield Legion that's there and these kinds of things. But there are other ways and better ways, frankly, to do this kind of work and honoring veterans if that's what the intention is. But I don't think we should be stopping affordable housing on surface parking lots unless there is an absolutely compelling reason for us to do so. I don't hear one yet. I know folks are going to come forward, their delegations, they're going to submit correspondence to council, and I think that Councilor Francis will be coming forward with something to say on the subject in a future meeting. At this point, I haven't heard anything that convinces me that there's no other alternatives for folks. There's not a way to maybe improve street parking or improve other parking around to help with some of these things, because we need to densify. And we can't have all the density in downtown because frankly, we're running out of space actually. And the urban boundary is massive, right? So if we're looking in wards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and beyond, up on the mountain, everywhere to densify, we ought to be doing that in every part of our city, every part. So I'm supportive of this going forward as affordable housing. I think it's a no-brainer. It's already actually zoned, so we don't have to even go through a zoning process. Like it's basically ready to go. And by the way, that was last council's priority of saying, get us some properties here. And this council's priority. How many councils have to make it their priority before we actually get the work done?
Well, it comes to whether or not the councillors have the courage to follow through. I mean, that's it for me because listen, council capitulated to the hats thing. Council capitulated. There's no other way of putting it. A little bit of pressure and all your colleagues were crickets when you were going through all of that. It was disgusting to watch as an outsider to what was happening at council. And as a communications professional who runs strategic objectives and initiatives, I could see that as soon as they won on stopping that little pilot for the shelters, they would use that exact same game plan when it came to any other affordable housing or shelters for people. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying, well, in the North End, they stopped it, so we should be able to stop it in the East End. And we're going to go raise a brouhaha and find some heart-pulling issue that makes it unconscionable. And it's all being snuck. And I got an email saying this was a sneaky move by council. No, it wasn't. It was all done up front. It's just that when they realized that they might actually get affordable housing in that neighborhood, they don't want it. And I got to tell you, my relative lives within like 3 minutes from there. a very nice neighborhood, right? Downtown Stoney Creek is a lovely little village and I love it. The only thing is people in Hamilton need somewhere to live. And I cannot imagine, because my camera person who was in the car taking the video said, I don't understand. Why would veterans in any way be offended by affordable housing? I mean, what did they fight for? They fought for a Canada that would take care of each other. So, I mean, it doesn't even make sense from that kind of emotional argument. Preserve the Veterans Lane, even make it a better Veterans Lane location. Name the building something to do with Veterans Lane. There's a million different ways to make sure that you are honoring the veterans and the history of Stoney Creek and building units so that people can live there. Because guess what? You're not only going to get to avoid downtown Hamilton to avoid seeing poverty. This is going to get worse before it gets better, and everybody has a role to play in helping our neighbors. Okay, let me shift to the police budget, because it's a huge chunk of cash in a city that clearly needs to define its priorities. And if you want to speak about the value of investing in bike lanes, given all these other things, please do, Councillor, because I know people are upset about that. We can get to that. But with the police services meeting, you're on the board. There was an opportunity to bring forward a budget and have a look at it. The mayor wasn't at the first meeting, as I understand it. The second meeting, when you're like, hello, we're not looking at this in detail enough before sending it to council, you got told, I think, by the mayor that, you know, she's never seen a budget committee meeting that looks at the budget, you know. And then you were at the police services board meeting. You talked in the media publicly about your concerns about the process. The chair decides in her statement to go after you, claiming that you're not being factual on the public record. You try to respond factually to correct the record, and she tries to shut you down. Let's have a look at the exchange that led to it, Cameron. And I think the danger here, if this is how our police services board is doing oversight on this major investment by people in this city. Let's have a look.
Clarifying facts, that's all I'm going to do. Member Bennick resigned from the board to take up the seat as provincial. When he resigned from the board, he resigned from all its committees. So he wasn't a member for the entire time I've been here, and that was my comment, and that sets the record straight. When we're speaking about having a budget emailed to us on November 22nd, it was less than 24 hours before the budget committee met for its first meeting. I've made that clear. Every word of everything I said at those meetings, I've said here in public, so none of this should be a surprise to anyone here. I'm concerned, however, that it's being read into the public record, and we can discuss that in the board members only section, because that's curious. I don't see the comments of any other councillors or members of that board being repeated here. So I also didn't say we never had the budget. I've never said that. I'm saying there was not an opportunity to ask questions about the budget. The second meeting of the budget committee, I'm going to finish speaking. I've been clarifying the facts in response to what you said. So I can't set the record straight.
Sorry, to call the...
What question?
Is to receive the chair's update. So can I have a motion? Vice Chair Bennick, Member Elms, all in favor? Opposed? Is there an abstention? No. Is that opposed or?
I'm opposed.
You're opposed. So
it should be talked about in public can be. Things that have to go in camera should go in camera.
Yeah, can I?
Just a minute. So the only thing that I'm worried about is I don't want to get into personal back and forth bashing. So if we have strong, the intent here was only to say we need to acknowledge what was said, and we need to acknowledge that there are different perceptions about what actually transpired and why. So as part of the discussion of this motion, member...
Can I finish responding? I just want to finish responding.
We're looking at a different motion now to call the question of the report.
I would just like to clarify here, and I was asking questions about process, and you're clarifying that this part of the agenda is only for us to clarify certain elements, right? Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen in our procedures or bylaws, and I'm new to the board, that is it just that the chair can voice their own individual personal opinions and quite frankly slander certain board members in this particular part of the meeting so that those board members are not allowed to respond, or like, was this part of actually a complaint? Because there's a complaint process, to my understanding, for board members. And I'm just trying to understand the process here, just also so the public can understand how the chair functions.
So another colleague on the Police Services Board likened that to slander. How are you feeling? And is that business as usual on this board? I mean, what's with the effort to silence? From the mayor saying, don't ask questions, we don't do that here, to the chair saying, you weren't allowed to go out and say that you couldn't ask questions. Like, what's going on?
Well, let's start with the basic premise that if we're going to come up with numbers to hold the city's budget to account at 4% of municipally generated taxes, like Councilor McMeekin put forward and was approved on Friday at council, then the police board should be held to something that's the same. And this isn't controversial in terms of the fact that people will say, oh, well, this signals that you're trying to do this and it's not supportive of the police. Look, Ward 12 Councillor Lloyd Ferguson and Ward 11 Councillor Brenda Johnson, who are one of whom was the chair of the Police Services Board later, put forward a motion in 2011 doing exactly the same thing, trying to get accountability from the police department in terms of their budget process. So this is not a new issue. This has been going on for a very, very long time, where people have concerns about how the police are budgeting, how they're bringing those budgets forward, and how they're responding to the city's asks. Back then, it was an ask of inflation, which is a heck of a lot lower than 4% at that time. So, I think that's the first thing I want to say, is that if we're going to be holding ourselves and our whole city budget to scrutiny, the largest portion of that budget, which is the police services budget at over almost $220 million, also deserves that same scrutiny. And that's all I've been saying. And unfortunately, this is kind of a sort of pattern at this board, which is, I just want to get the things on the record publicly to let people know what's happening. People didn't vote me into office to be quiet. They didn't vote me into office not to speak out when things were happening I was concerned about. The reason you put people on these boards in these positions, I hope, is to represent your interests in the community and represent the interests of the city in some way. I'm there as a member of the Police Services Board, and there's a certain legislation for that. And it's my right to say things like, I'm concerned that we didn't follow the process. When the Budget Committee doesn't make enough time to meet to discuss the actual budget and only discusses the presentation for the budget, that's a concern to me. I tried to further my questions and dig deeper, and the meetings were shut down. The Budget Committee didn't even vote on the budget to send it off to the board. That's a basic democratic principle of recommending a budget to the board. You vote on it. We voted on it the year previous. And so what's going on here? As over time, it seems to be less and less democratic from my perspective. And I'm very concerned about the fact that at the actual open public board meeting, because of course, budget committee meetings are also in secret for some reason, the open budget committee meeting, we had kind of the open board meeting where we discussed the budget. Yeah, I said, I'm concerned about the fact that we haven't really actually asked questions about the budget at the budget committee, and was challenged by people saying, well, we don't do that work. And I said, we certainly do. City council, we do it all the time. We're bringing lines out of the budget constantly. If we can't do that same work of bringing motions forward to reduce the police budget that we're doing at city council, what's going on here? So that's been my point all along, is we have to have more rigor. We have to be more thorough. We have to put the interests of residents first. And what I hear from residents nonstop is, I'm not getting the services from the police that I want. I'm concerned about their budget. I'm concerned about these other things. Great. So I'm bringing those forward publicly and being told, hey, you can't say anything that would even be not positive about this board. Yeah. And the answer to that question is, or my response, I should say, is, I sure can. I sure can be critical in public. I sure can be honest. As long as I'm not lying or saying things that aren't true, that's all that matters. And unfortunately, the chair took the opportunity at the beginning of that meeting to try and sort of make a big statement to suggest that I was being untruthful, or suggest that I didn't have the facts. And frankly, I do. As I said at the meeting, I have those receipts. And anytime someone wants to say, I think Councilor Kroetsch is lying, I encourage them to come forward. Happy to have that conversation in public. And I'm not going to back down from being open and honest, truthful, and critical. It's my job to hold the service to some account, but it's also my job to ensure that the board is doing its job. And if it's not, one of us has to speak up. We can't all sit there quietly and say, well, maybe we shouldn't say that because it's not nice. Look, this isn't a meeting where I'm there to make best friends with everybody. It's a meeting where I'm there to do my due diligence as a governor, and I'm going to do it.
It's not kumbaya and daycare. Come on, you all have to get along. It's ridiculous. And when the election came up to kind of change that power structure, to bring in a racialized person, I think as vice chair and yourself to be considered as chair, if I'm correct, Cam, didn't the mayor vote for status quo for the same structure, for the same stuff that you're talking about here? So I mean, hell's yeah, speak up. People's lives are in the balance to the point of how we started this entire show. So just a quick question, who's got fiduciary responsibility? Is it the Police Services Board or is it council ultimately for the police service?
Well, it's really interesting. So the board is the one that brings the actual budget forward to council. It's not the service. And I don't doubt that the service have actually taken this job seriously. I don't doubt our city staff have taken their job seriously. We still got a directive from our mayor just saying to city staff, I want you to reduce it. So, I want you to think about it that way. Council has every right to just say, nope, we want you to meet a certain target, or nope, we want to do this, or we want to send the whole thing back. And that's our prerogative. But unfortunately, council can't actually go through the budget line by line. That's the real travesty here. The board had an opportunity through its budget committee meetings in secret, and then its public board meeting to really sit and say, where are we finding savings here? For board members to come forward and present motion. That was not allowed to happen. And that process was cut short. And as we saw at the beginning of that meeting, even when members tried to bring up issues and question the service about race-based data, for instance, they were shut down. So this whole kind of thing that's happening at the police board is about silencing, is about coming after folks who are speaking out truthfully, and it's disturbing. That's not the first time this has happened to me. The city took me to the integrity commissioner a while back because I spoke the truth in public. I'm going to keep doing it, keep speaking the truth in public. I'm going to make sure I've got my facts straight and make sure I'm always being honest and clear. That's okay, and that should be permitted. And we should have people on boards and committees who are willing to say, you know what, maybe we should reflect on this and do better. Maybe this isn't quite the right process. And if we can't meet that basic minimum standard, then I think the city has to do everything it can to intervene to change that.
The city came after you with an integrity complaint, and the mayor said comments that I found to be disparaging about you in public around that whole issue back in the day. You were a volunteer. And within, I think, 48 hours, $22,000 was raised by the community to help with your legal fees, which is why when you ran for council, you won in a landslide against former councillor Jason Farr for the downtown ward. So, I mean, you do have a mandate to speak up and to call out these things and to make transparency and accountability part of what Hamilton's supposed to be now. That's the city manager's big thing. That's Andrea's big thing. And here she is the mayor is trying to shut you down in a meeting. And we saw the city put out false information around a privacy breach that Joey Coleman had to get them to essentially correct with the new city manager in the job. I mean, we have to keep kicking at the darkness till it bleeds daylight in this bloody town and province, I would argue. One last thing before I let you go, though, Councillor. Oshow viewers want me to ask you, how can we go forward with all these bike lane infrastructure given the price tag?
Thanks for that. I think this is one of the real bits of dissonance or confusion around budgets, is that we don't really do an excellent job of presenting the information clearly, and we ought to do a better job of that. I've been working hard for the last year, and I'll say this budget is way clearer than the last one. So we're getting there. Yeah. But a couple things that come up: Main Street conversion. Oh, it's going to cost $26 million and it's going to come out of this budget. Nope. Those are some baked in costs that we've been saving towards for years. Same thing with the bike lane. Oh, it's going to cost us $60 million this year. Nope. It's closer to around $6 million or a tenth of that. And there's going to be provincial and federal matching funding coming into this to expand bike lanes. And this is actually a mandate, not just at the city of Hamilton, but at the provincial and federal level. And they're actually stepping up with dollars to make it happen. What we know about bike lanes, when you put them in, connect them together and make them safe, is people use them. And small businesses thrive. There are better impacts for the environment and people's health. This is part of our mandate as a city. We have a board of health. We have to care about people's public health, and we have to give them opportunities to be able to get around the city safely no matter where they are. Downtown, I can speak to that. It's a dangerous, dangerous place for people. And they're often looking around, trying to protect themselves from speeding, motor vehicle traffic. And having more safe bike lanes is going to make people feel like they can participate more in their city, be more engaged. And what's wrong with that? I think we have to look at doing all things. We can do more than one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important for us to take advantage of these opportunities when we have all these matching funds to go forward with something, accelerate that infrastructure, and lead on this.
So on my last note on the bike lanes, help those of us who live on the mountain who would like to bike. get down there safely. So the bike trail, the rail trail, can we have lights on that thing, please? Because right now it's incredibly unsafe. We need lights and some other kind of measures along the rail trail. But to the bigger point, which is leadership. And you bifurcated it between, backroom leadership process and vocalizing leadership. And I'll accept your bifurcation, Councillor. But to me, if you're not saying stuff, you don't believe in it, you don't have the answers, you haven't done the work. In other words, whenever there is something that goes on at Toronto City Hall, I'm working out on my treadmill at the gym and I see Olivia Chow doing a press conference. She's constantly communicating about where things are and why they're happening and why the budget looks like this and why, which is what a leader does. So I would really love it if somebody had said what you just said around the investment of bike lanes and how it's broken up over years and how there's funding put aside and all the partnered funding. I haven't heard that, right? So, I mean, in this world where we're all getting a fire hose of information in our faces at a rate that humanity has never experienced, it requires that leaders step up and speak up frequently, consistently, cohesively, coherently, right? And convincingly. And we're not seeing our mayor do that as the spokesperson for council. We are not seeing councillors back up their own votes when things get a little messy out there. And we're sure not seeing the kind of all hands on deck urgent response we need to the people right now who are freezing in a sleeping bag, in the doorways of some of our old, beautiful buildings downtown. It is an absolute disgrace. I don't hold you as part of the problem. I think you're fighting hard for the solution, and some of the other councillors are too, but not enough together as a group to have that kind of leadership that the city needs from our mayor and our council to say these things are happening. There's going to be parking lots across the city that are going to see affordable housing in the next 5 years. It's happening. Stop with the petitions. They're not going to win because this is our emergency declaration. This is our priority, and this is something that we have the power to do. So I hope that council gets some courage because we're going to need it, right? We need you guys to be courageous, to get your priorities that we all voted you in for, to get them done. They look good on paper. I'm glad you had the priority setting session. What does it mean when a little bit of pushback means that it's going to be another few years of delay for people, or people who this winter are freezing on the streets that could have had a shelter? It's unacceptable. So I appreciate what you're doing, Cameron, and we'll keep fighting the fight at the provincial level for every municipality in this province that needs to have a better provincial partner. But at the end of the day, it comes down, as it always does in life, to whether people have the courage of their convictions and whether or not they're willing to stand for them. And that's something that you've always done. So thank you very much for being on the Oshow and this tough conversation.
Thanks, Laura. I really appreciate being here.
And thank you all for subscribing. We're over 1,000 subscribers now, which is really kind of fun. And we're getting a lot of viewers from all over the place and a lot of commentary and thousands of views on our clips. And we really appreciate all of the support. We're in this together, whether it's Hamilton, Ontario, and Canada. It looks like it's coming to be. We have to all get in on these discussions of how to help each other and how to be successful. Take care.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.